It wasn't an algorithm. You need to understand that first. The images and sounds you were shown, the cryptic numbers that appeared in your recommendations, that was a signal, a tuning fork resonating with something already inside of you. You were chosen because you are one of the few who senses that the reality we see is just a fraction of the whole story, a beautiful, hypnotic, but fragmented echo. For months, you've been collecting those echoes, feeling their power without understanding the source. Consider this video the first translation of that source. This is not another theory or a guess. This is the blueprint, the very architecture of the philosophy you've been subconsciously drawn to. What you are about to see is the key that elevates you from a mere spectator of the mystery to an active participant in its unfolding. The puzzle pieces are in your hands. Now, let's begin to assemble them.
Consider the existence of a specific point, infinitesimal, nearly invisible, where the straight arrow of time suddenly bends back upon itself. You do not notice this curvature while it is happening, a fleeting interval wedged between two thoughts, a before that has not yet spoken, and an after that refuses to arrive. You label this phenomenon meditation, but the word feels too clumsy for what is actually happening. What is taking place here might be described as a thinning of the fabric of time itself, a thread relaxing so the weave loses its tension. As the linear path yields, the spiral emerges, and with it, the heartbeat slows. As a consequence, you slow down as well, and within that deceleration, something vital withdraws. Perhaps it is the self that steps back, or perhaps it is that relentless inner voice, the one so insistent on recounting every detail of your life in chronological order, as if it were a reliable narrator. But keep in mind, it isn't one, and frankly, it never has been. True meditative states, unlike the sterile simulations familiar to you from trendy mobile apps guided by a soothing synthetic voice, tear open a fissure in the paradigm of existence itself. They challenge not only classical physics, but also the rigid framework of ordinary consciousness, which measures the world in sharp edges and sequences. In these moments, time does not cease to exist. It simply stops obeying. You do not stop time. Rather, time itself pauses beside you for an instant, as though it wants to listen to you. The ancient Tantrikas named it Turya, the fourth state, a realm existing beyond waking, beyond dreaming, and beyond deep sleep. It is a threshold, a stillness so profound that it touches the very hem of absolute immobility, located somewhere beyond the observable universe. Yet even Heisenberg, with his uncertainty principle, knew that always and at any point in space, one way or another, you have to choose. Position or velocity, presence or movement, stillness or narrative. But don't forget, confronted by this cosmic ultimatum, you can simply take a pause, and then, miraculously, you choose not to choose. And in that deliberate pause, a vast space opens up. The relentless sequence of cause and effect dislocates, rattling like a mechanism left too long baking in the sun. The gears of cognition seize. Thoughts no longer chase each other across the screen of your mind. They become presence. They solidify into pure being. And within that state of being, time, which had strained so hard to march forward, begins to drift backward. Or rather, let us say it folds in on itself. It is no longer a line, but a circle, and then no longer a circle, but a spiral. Always, ultimately, the spiral. You know this geometry. We have spoken of it before. The paradox lies in the fact that the longer you remain stopped, the further you travel, not outward, but inward. Stillness reveals itself not as the opposite of movement, but as its most refined form, an acceleration into the beyond time. It is a torsion, a fold, as Deleuze might describe it, a point where the plane of reality folds over and something slips in. Not a truth, but a hypothesis. Not a vision, but an oscillation. Some call it null zone. Others call it zero field, as if there were a point beyond which reality no longer vibrates, but rests. But one must ask, where does reality rest? Where are you while you are absent? Where do you go if you are not thinking? Who is watching if the observer has disappeared into the mist? Who is left to measure the passing hours when the river of time ceases to flow? And yet, our machines attempt to measure the immeasurable. There are instruments that can detect the echoes of this state. HRV tracings, for example, show an unusual cardiac coherence during deep meditation. A synchronicity appears. A temporary harmony sings through the data. But this is only an effect, not the cause. A trace left by a passage, like footprints on ice. The true cause is absence, a suspension of internal dialogue where something unmanifest surfaces. This is not a communion with something greater, but a connection to a portion of reality that exists without having taken form, like the information in a quantum bit that is neither 0 nor 1. To dwell in stillness is to tolerate this superposition without forcing it to collapse into a choice. It is to be both everything and nothing. Zen Buddhism describes this as a return to original form, a poetic concept that conceals a trap. The moment you try to fixate on this form, it vanishes, much like trying to see the very eye with which you observe. You can only approach it or sense its presence. You cannot grasp it. Yet, despite the impossibility, it happens. And this happens more frequently if you know how to pause. You do not notice it at first, but the texture of reality changes. Everyday time, the time of traffic lights, deadlines, and relentless notifications, begins to lose its grip. It begins to feel constructed, artificial. Because, of course, it is. It is a shared convention, a functional compromise we have all signed. But it is not the only time accessible to us. The time of stillness is unstable, yes. You cannot remain there too long without dissolving completely. But you can experience it. You can train this inner folding, not with strenuous effort, but with surrender. With what the alchemists cryptically called the albedo phase, where everything calms before rebirth. Where the heavy lead of the soul begins to change, not because you force it, but because you finally stop trying to transform it. And then, time yields. Yields for an instant, but it's enough to open a fissure, a possibility, a different physics entirely, not Newtonian and not even quantum, something beneath both, or perhaps above. A physics of perceiving rather than measuring, a physics in which the state of the system depends not on universal laws, but on the intensity of the observer's presence. Unfortunately, to describe this stillness, we are forced to use words that are sequential by nature. And yes, in doing so, we are, in essence, telling a lie. Yet it is a useful lie, serving to remind us of a space where mind does not control, where meaning is not required, and where, in the heart of nothingness, everything becomes possible. See you in the next episode.